dim the lights, let go of the day, and slip into something a little more honest. You're listening to Why Is It So Hard with Lizzie and Nash, where things get deep, raw, and just a little dangerous.
Welcome to Why Is It So Hard with Lizzie and Nash. Actually, this time it's just Nash. Tonight, or today, depending on when you're listening to this episode is aimed towards the guys, because now we're going to talk about menopause and perimenopause and how it isn't killing your sex life. It's just your ego, and your ego is way too fucking loud. But first, the disclaimer, because some of you will forget this later and act like I personally prescribed your wife estrogen through a podcast speaker. I'm not a doctor. I'm not your attorney, your clergy. I'm just a husband. All right. I'm a husband. I'm just someone with an opinion, and I have things I want to share. Don't listen to TikTok if you've got issues, if you've got red flags or sex feels like, I don't know, sandpaper. Don't listen to your buddy who's read a thread about it or your uncle who thinks vitamins fix everything. Go talk to a doctor. That's what they're for. Stop the podcast episode and go talk to a doctor. Now, back to the actual episode. If you're a guy listening to this, here's what you probably want to know underneath all your pretending you're chill energy. Is perimenopause or menopause going to wreck my relationship and turn my bedroom into a museum? The answer is it can, but not because menopause is some supernatural curse that shows up to cancel sex. It's because a lot of men handle this chapter like they handle a check engine light. They ignore it. They turn the music up, then they're shocked when something expensive breaks. Let's start with the basics without the health class voice. Perimenopause is a messy transition. Hormones fluctuate, cycles change, sleep can get weird, mood can swing, desire can change, bodies do body things, and it can last years. Menopause is basically a label you get after 12 straight months with no period. That's the official "we're here now" part. So when guys say, my wife hit menopause and suddenly whatever, what they often mean is, my wife has been dealing with perimenopause symptoms for a while, and I thought she was just in a bad mood and also personally mad at me. Man, we love to personalize. It's our hobby. We walk into a room, feel tension, and immediately assume we're being audited. And this is where we start screwing it up. Because the biggest lie men tell themselves in this chapter is, this is about me. Not always. Now, sometimes it is. Relationships are complicated enough. But a lot of times this is about sleep deprivation, stress tolerance dropping, and a body that suddenly needs different inputs than it used to, which is annoying, yes, but it's also normal. Here's the part that matters for your sex life. Sex doesn't happen in a vacuum. Sex is the final output of the whole system. And when the system gets disrupted, the output changes. So if your partner is waking up drenched at night, tossing and turning, brain running hot, and she's running the day on fumes, it's not exactly a mystery why she's not floating through the house like, hello, sir, I'm here to be enthusiastically service to your needs. That's not how human bodies work. That's the customer service fantasy. Now, let's talk about the thing that guys pretend they don't understand until it affects them. Comfort. A lot of women in this season deal with vaginal dryness or tissue changes. That can turn sex from fun into not fun real quick. And I'm going to say this plainly because apparently we need to tattoo it on our foreheads. If sex starts to hurt, her body is not going to crave it. It's going to avoid it. That's not rejection. That's self-preservation. And if you respond to that with sulking and pressure or sarcasm or that wounded dog vibe where you stomp around acting like you've been oppressed by the United Nations, you're going to make it worse. Because then she's not dealing with physical discomfort. Now she's managing your feelings about it too. And nothing makes a woman horny like emotional babysitting. Trust me, just ask them. This is where I need to talk to the men directly. Like I'm grabbing you by the collar in a loving way, right? When sex gets weird or less frequent, a lot of guys go to one of two extremes. They either start pressuring or they start withdrawing. Pressuring looks like constant initiating, joking about how long it's been, pouting, getting cold when you don't get what you want, turning every cuddle into a negotiation. It's not communication. It's coercive energy with a polite face. Withdrawing looks like becoming a roommate. No affection, no warmth, no flirting, because you're protecting yourself. What you're actually doing is punishing the relationship because you didn't get the outcome you wanted. Both of those approaches scream the same message. Your body is a problem, and now I'm going to act worse until you fix it. That is not sexy. That's a freaking temper tantrum from a fucking toddler dressed as an adult. Here's the brutal truth. Your partner's desire will not survive your insecurity. Not long-term. Desire needs safety. It needs ease. It needs room. If she feels like she's going to pay a price for not being in the mood, she'll avoid being close to you at all because closeness becomes risky. And then you'll say, we have no intimacy anymore. Well, yeah, because you made intimacy come with consequences, you dick. Now, I'm not saying you can't be frustrated. Of course you can. You're allowed to miss sex. You're allowed to want your partner. You're allowed to feel disconnected. What you're not allowed to do is turn those feelings into pressure and then call it needs. Because here's another harsh truth. A lot of what men call needing sex is actually needing reassurance. Needing proof you're still wanted. Needing proof you still matter. Needing proof you're still the man. And sex is a terrible way to demand reassurance because the moment you demand it, it stops being sexy. If you want to stay hot through this chapter, you need a new mindset. Adaptation is not a downgrade. Adaptation is skill. This is the era where foreplay stops being a formality and becomes the foundation. Not because we're being delicate, but because bodies sometimes need more time to warm up. Arousal might take longer. Lubrication might not show up in the same way. Comfort might require actual attention. And if you keep doing the same rush routine you've been doing since 2009, you're going to create friction. Literally. And yes, we're going to talk about lube like adults. Lube is not an insult. Lube is not an admission of failure. Lube is equipment. If your masculinity can't handle a bottle of silicone, your masculinity is basically wet cardboard. Grab the fucking lube. If she was here right now, I'd tell you to ask Lizzie. We grab it all the time. It's not because I'm broke or she's broke. It's because it adds to the intimacy. That shit's pretty cheap, and I'll buy it all day long if it keeps things going. Sex doesn't have to equal penetration every single time either, guys. That's another place men get lazy. They treat sex like a one-act play. Make out, grope, penetrate, finish, done. When comfort changes, that script can fail. So we expand your range. You become the kind of man who can keep things hot without needing one specific act to make it count. Because when sex has flexibility, it stays alive. When sex is rigid, it collapses the moment the body changes. And I know some guys are hearing that and thinking, so what? I'm just supposed to accept less? No, you're supposed to accept different. There's a big difference there. Different can still be filthy. Different can still be intense. Different can still be frequent, but it has to be built on comfort and arousal, not on entitlement and speed. Now, I want to talk about the deeper thing men don't like admitting. Menopause is also a relationship stress test. Not because your partner is broken, because it exposes your systems. If she's been carrying the household mentally and emotionally for years, this is the season where her tolerance for that can hit a wall. And if you've been coasting, you might suddenly find out she's not willing to silently drag the whole life machine forward while also sweating through the sheets at night and feeling weird in her body. And if you respond to her stress by adding more stress, you're going to feel that distance grow. So the goal of this episode for the guys is not how do I get my wife to have more sex? The goal is how do I stay attractive and connected while her body is changing? Because the men who win this chapter do a few simple things. They stop taking everything personally. They stop making sex a scoreboard. They stop turning affection into a transaction. They get curious instead of defensive. They protect comfort. They stay warm even when they're frustrated, and they handle their own disappointment like grown-ass men, not wounded freaking teenagers. That's it. That is the whole playbook. This chapter doesn't need you to be a hormone expert. It needs you to be emotionally steady, sexually adaptable, and not a giant bitch about change. And honestly, if you can't do that, you don't just survive this season. You can end up with a sex life that's more intentional, more honest, and sometimes way hotter than the autopilot years. Because nothing is sexier than a man who can adjust without whining. If the first part was the stop making it about you part, then this part is going to be the sequel nobody asked for but everyone needs. Stop acting like her nervous system is your personal Yelp review. Because here's what happens in real life. Perimenopause hits, sleep gets trashed, mood swing, patience gets thin, and the average man looks at the situation and goes, wow, she hates me. No, she's tired. She's hot. Her body's doing weird shit. Her brain is running 12 tabs all at once, and you're standing there like you're waiting for a verdict. Let's talk about sleep first, because sleep is the silent assassin of everything good in a relationship. When someone isn't sleeping, they don't just feel a little tired. They feel like their skin is too tight, their brain is buzzing, their emotions are raw. Everything is louder. Every minor annoyance feels personal. Every request feels like one more weight on a barbell they're already failing. So if your partner is waking up at night, sweating, tossing, waking up angry for no fucking reason, and then dragging herself through the day, that's not a character flaw. That's not she's become negative. That's physiology plus exhaustion plus life. And what do men do with that? We do the dumbest shit possible. We try to fix it with logic. You should just go back to sleep. Why don't you take a nap? Maybe don't think about it. Have you tried not being stressed? Yeah, that's fucking brilliant and revolutionary. Thank you, Dr. Sleep. Now, let's talk about mood changes, because this is where men get defensive, shut down, or become hall monitors. Mood swings can show up in this chapter. Anxiety can show up. Low mood can show up. Irritability can show up. Sometimes it's hormonal fluctuations. Sometimes it's the stress of life being stacked on top of a body that already feels unpredictable. Sometimes it's both. But what men hear is, she's being mean. And then we respond with one of two equally stupid moves. We escalate or we withdraw. Escalate looks like snapping back, trying to win the moment, matching her tone, turning the room into a debate club where the prize is mutual resentment. Withdrawal looks like going cold, going quiet, going fine, sulking in silence, or acting like we're the victim of an emotional crime. Both choices turn a rough moment into a long-term problem. Here's the key for guys. When someone is in a highly reactive state, your job isn't to win. Your job is to not add gas. And I know some of you hate hearing that because it sounds like be a doormat. It's not. It's be strategic. If your partner is dysregulated, you're trying to teach her a lesson, is not leadership, okay? That's ego. If she's snapping and you snap back, you're not defending yourself. You're co-signing the chaos. If she's anxious or irritable and you start demanding reassurance that she still loves you, you're not being vulnerable. You're making her carry you while she's already carrying herself. And this is where the male perspective part matters, because guys do this thing where we turn her mood into a measurement of our worth. If she's happy, we're safe. If she's not happy, we're in trouble. If she's irritated, we're being rejected. If she's overwhelmed, we're failing as a partner. So we start panicking, and then we behave in ways that make her even less calm. Again, you can't solve dysregulation by demanding that she perform calmness for you. And let's talk about the biggest male mistake with mood in this chapter, calling it hormones as a way to dismiss her. This is where men think they're being scientific, but they're actually being cowardly pricks. Oh, it's just hormones. Yeah, sometimes it is hormones. Sometimes hormones are absolutely amplifying things. But if you use hormones as a way to invalidate her experience, what she hears is your feelings don't count. And if a woman feels like her feelings don't count, she stops sharing them. She stops inviting you into her inner world. She stops being emotionally close. Then the bedroom goes cold because sex doesn't thrive where emotional closeness has been starved. So what's the correct male move here? It's not fix her mood. It's not police her tone. And it's definitely not become the calmness sheriff. It's this: be steady, be warm, be consistent, and stop acting like every tense moment means the marriage is freaking over. That sounds simple, but it's hard for men because our nervous systems want to respond to tension with either combat or retreat. So you have to build a third option: presence. Presence looks like not escalating. Presence looks like not withdrawing affection. Presence looks like staying physically and emotionally available without trying to win the moment. And yes, I'm going to say something blunt. A lot of men don't do presence because they're scared they'll lose control. But control isn't intimacy. Control is just fear wearing a suit. Now, let's talk about how this ties directly to sex, because I know that's why half of you are listening while pretending you're listening for the relationship. When mood is unstable and sleep is wrecked, desire becomes fragile. Not impossible, but fragile. And if you treat desire like it's supposed to show up exactly the same way it always did, you're going to create pressure and be sorely disappointed. Pressure becomes a stressor. Stress kills arousal. Then you act confused why sex feels harder. So instead of treating libido like a light switch, you treat it like a fire. You don't demand fire. You build conditions for fire. You build warmth during the day. You build affection that doesn't come with an invoice. You build flirtation that doesn't become a negotiation. You build safety so her nervous system can unclench. Because if her nervous system is braced all damn day, her body is not going to magically open up at night because you did a shoulder rub for 12 seconds and then started grabbing her like you're collecting your reward. Here's the part where I'm going to be explicit for the guys who need the visual. If your partner is in a season where her body is sensitive, her sleep is wrecked, her mood is unpredictable, and she's feeling not like herself, the last thing she needs is you treating her like a vending machine. Put in compliment, do one chore, receive sex. That's not intimacy. That is a transaction, and she can feel it. So if you want more long-term sex, you stop doing the stupid short-term moves that make her nervous system associate you with pressure. Instead, you become the man who makes the house feel easier. You make her load lighter. You make her day calmer. You make her feel wanted without being hunted. That's how sex comes back. Not because you forced it, because you stopped scaring it away. Now, one more important thing, because I'm not doing the all feelings or hormones thing. Sometimes perimenopause and menopause is happening and it's also revealing resentment that's being ignored, overload that's been normalized, communication patterns that suck, and intimacy habits that were already lazy. Menopause didn't create those things. It just removed the buffer she used to have to tolerate them. So if your reaction is, she changed, you might be right. But the deeper truth might be, she stopped swallowing. Get your fucking mind out of the gutter. And if you want to stay close, you don't meet that with defensiveness. You meet it with willingness. Not, I'll do anything to get sex back. That's still transactional. Willingness looks like, I see you, I believe you, I'm not going to make this harder. That's it. That's the line. It's not a script. It's a posture. I'm going to end this part with the thing men need burned into their brains. If you can't stay emotionally steady with your partner when she's having this season, you will not be trusted with her body in this season. Because sex requires trust, not just she trusts you won't cheat, or she trusts you won't punish her, or she trusts you won't sulk into her compliance. Be the kind of man whose presence calms the room. That's how you stay desired when everything else is shifting. If you're a guy listening, you probably want me to hand you a simple answer like, do this one trick and your wife will want sex again. And I would, but the universe hates simplicity and your ego can't afford the truth anyway. Here it is. A lot of sex problems in this chapter are comfort problems. Not attraction problems, not love problems, not she's over you problems. Comfort. And comfort is the part men love to ignore because it requires patience, skill, and the terrifying act of not centering your penis like it's the main character in a movie that should have been canceled. Let's talk about what changes in plain language. As estrogen drops, a lot of women experience vaginal dryness and tissue changes. Not maybe, not rare. This is common enough that the Mayo Clinic and the ACOG, they both talk about it openly and recommend basic solution like lubricants and moisturizers, plus medical options when it's more persistent. There's also a term you'll hear probably called GSM. I'm not even going to try to freaking pronounce those words, but it's a fancy way of saying the vaginal and urinary tissues can get drier, thinner, and more sensitive. And that can affect sex and sometimes urinary symptoms too. Now, I'm going to say something that shouldn't be controversial, but somehow it is. If sex hurts, she's not going to want it. And if you respond to that by acting rejected, your response becomes a second problem on top of the first, because now she's dealing with discomfort and your ability to act like a little bitch. Yeah, that's sexy. So what to do if sex feels different, or she says it hurts, or she's avoiding penetration? You do the most adult thing imaginable. Stop rushing. Because rushing is usually what turns a little dry into this feels bad. Men rush for two reasons: habit and fear. Habit, because they've been rushing the same script for years and never had to relearn it. Fear, because if they slow down, they're scared the moment won't go anywhere. They're scared they'll get turned on and then not get to the finish line. They're scared of disappointment. So instead, they speedrun foreplay like it's an obstacle, which makes the body less ready, which makes sex less comfortable, which makes desire shrink, which makes the guy rush more next time. It's a gorgeous little feedback loop of self-sabotage. And this is where I need to talk directly to the men who think foreplay is optional. Foreplay is not extra in this season. Foreplay is the foundation. The Mayo Clinic literally says things like allowing time to become aroused and using lubricants can help reduce discomfort related to vaginal dryness and painful sex after menopause. So if you're still doing the old move where you touch for 30 seconds and then aim for penetration like you're racing a clock, you are actively making it worse. And yes, we're going to talk about lube like adults. Lube is not an insult. Lube is not she's not into you. Lube is not I failed. Lube is equipment. It is a tool for comfort. It reduces friction, and friction is literally the enemy here. So if your masculinity can't handle a bottle of lube, congratulations. Your masculinity is weaker than plastic. Now, here's where we get explicit because a lot of guys need the visual. Penetration without enough arousal can feel irritating, burning, tight, or just flat out unpleasant. If you take a body that's dry or sensitive and you add friction, you're basically creating a negative association. The body learns fast. This hurts, avoid. I mean, remember the first time you touched the stove? Shit hurt and you didn't do it again. Well, maybe some of you did. Anyway, when the guy says, why is she never in the mood? Because you trained her nervous system to associate sex with discomfort and pressure. So the solution is not initiate harder. The solution is make sex feel good again. That means you stop treating sex like one act. A lot of men are so penetration-centered that when penetration becomes uncomfortable, they act like the entire sex life is gone. Like the only way intimacy counts is if the penis gets what it wants. That's not a sex life. That's a freaking narrow hobby. This chapter forces you to expand your range because when sex has flexibility, it survives comfort changes. And if you're thinking, so what? I'm just supposed to settle for less? No, you're supposed to get smarter, dumbass. because different doesn't mean less hot. It means less lazy. Now, a quick medically responsible note without turning this into an after-school special. If dryness and discomfort are persistent, there are options beyond just lube. Talk to your doctor. There are things like low-dose vaginal estrogen, prasterone. I don't even know what the hell that is, but it doesn't matter. I don't have to know what it is. It's the fact that these things are out there for you and your spouse, your partner, whoever. Let her do the talking. The Menopause Society in 2022 position statement makes it clear hormone therapy remains the most effective for hot flashes and can help with individualized risk-benefit decisions depending on timing, formulation, and medical history. What's that translate to? That means suffering isn't a virtue. There are tools. There are treatments. You don't have to pretend the only options are do nothing or end the sex life. And I'm going to say this because it's important. If she's having bleeding after sex, bleeding after menopause, or persistent pain that doesn't improve, that's not a podcast fix. That's a get evaluated situation. I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm trying to keep you from being the guy who ignores something that should be checked. Let's get back to the heat. Here's the best way to think about sex in this chapter. Your job is to make the experience so physically and emotionally safe that her body doesn't brace. Because bracing is the enemy. Bracing kills arousal. Bracing makes penetration hurt. Bracing makes desire disappear. So you slow down. You build arousal properly. You use lube without shame. You let sex be flexible. You stop acting like penetration is the only measure of intimacy. And you stop reacting like a wounded child if things need to change. Because nothing is less sexy than a grown man sulking because his partner's body needs care. This isn't the end of your sex life. It's the end of autopilot sex. And honestly, that's good. Men love simple controls. On, off, start, stop, sex now, sex later. You want me or you don't. That's how guys want desire to work because it's tidy and it keeps the ego safe. Perimenopause and menopause do not care about your need for tidy. This is the chapter where a lot of women's desire becomes more conditional, not fake or gone, conditional, meaning the right conditions matter more. Comfort, sleep, stress level, emotional safety, and whether she feels like a person or a task machine. And this is where men screw it up because when desire doesn't look the way it used to, men take it as a verdict. She doesn't want me. She's not attracted anymore. Our sex life is dying. Sometimes it's none of that. Sometimes it's simply the pathway changed. Here's the idea guys need in their bones. Desire often doesn't show up first. A lot of men wait for their partner to want it the way she did in her 20s, like she's supposed to spontaneously be turned on while exhausted, stressed, and uncomfortable in her body. Meanwhile, the male contribution to the environment is zero flirting all day, life chaos, resentment in the house, and then a midnight grope that feels like a confused raccoon searching for snacks. Then you're shocked she's not ready. That's not a libido mystery. That's you being bad at context. A lot of desire in long-term relationships is responsive. It shows up after the right kind of warmth, touch, tension, safety. It shows up when the body feels comfortable and the brain isn't bracing. It's not broken, it's normal. And menopause can amplify that because if sleep is wrecked or mood is volatile or sex has been uncomfortable, the spontaneous side of desire often shows up less. Low libido, mood swings, anxiety, and sleep problems are listed as common menopause, perimenopause symptoms. So, if those things are in play, desire doesn't disappear because she stopped loving you. It disappears because her system is under load. And instead of reducing the load, men do the opposite. They add pressure. Pressure is the libido killer that men refuse to acknowledge because it's inconvenient to their narrative. Pressure doesn't always look like demanding sex. It can be subtle, and that's what makes it so poisonous. Pressure is the vibe that says, if we don't have sex tonight, I'm going to be moody tomorrow. Pressure is the jokes about being celibate. Pressure is affection that comes without expectation. Pressure is the sigh, the pout, the wounded silence. And the body reads that as closeness isn't safe. Closeness has consequences. So she avoids it. And then you say she's distant. And then you escalate. And then she avoids harder. Congratulations, you built your own drought. If you want to understand desire like an adult, think about it like this. Desire has brakes and gas. Men love pushing the gas. More initiating, more hints, more grabbing, more asking. But in this chapter, the brakes matter more. The exhaustion, stress, resentment, discomfort, anxiety, pressure from you, and the self-consciousness. Push the gas while the brakes are on and you get nothing. Or you get duty sex, or you get avoidance, or you get a relationship that feels like a negotiation. So the smarter play is reducing brakes. And that's not just be nicer, it's practical. If sex has been uncomfortable, you protect comfort. Lube, slower warm-up, different pacing, flexibility in what sex counts as, and medical help when needed. This isn't me repeating the earlier part of this episode. It's me making the point that discomfort is not just physical, it's psychological. Once sex becomes associated with pain or pressure, desire gets cautious. If she's not sleeping, you stop expecting her to have the same capacity. You protect the evening, you reduce stress. You don't start fights at midnight like an idiot. You stop turning the house into a courtroom. If she's carrying the mental load, you stop being an extra child in the house. We'll get into that more later, but it matters here because resentment is a massive break. Now, let's talk about what men do that is basically desire poison. Making initiation a test. Yeah, men initiate, and if she's not into it, they don't just feel disappointed, they feel rejected as a person. Then they react with emotion. That reaction creates pressure. Pressure creates avoidance. Avoidance creates more reactivity. So your job is to stop treating not tonight like a courtroom verdict. Not tonight is not always no. Sometimes it's I'm tired. Sometimes it's my body feels weird. Sometimes it's sex has felt uncomfortable lately and I'm bracing. Sometimes it's I'm overstimulated. I'm anxious. I want you, but I can't access that right now. If you collapse all of that into she doesn't want me, you're reading the situation through insecurity and not reality. And insecurity is not erotic. Now, here's how you keep heat alive without making her responsible for your ego. You keep the erotic channel open without demanding outcomes. That means you flirt without expecting it to go somewhere every single time. You touch without escalating every time. You kiss without it being a down payment. You keep warmth in a relationship even when sex isn't happening at the frequency you want. Because when every moment of closeness becomes a potential negotiation, she'll stop offering closeness. And then you'll complain about closeness and you'll end up in the same dumb loop. Here's the truth men hate because it requires self-control. If you want desire, you need to be safe to disappoint. If she can say not tonight and you can stay warm, affectionate, playful, and emotional steady, her body learns closeness is safe. If she says not tonight and you become cold, moody, or punitive, her body learns closeness is risky. And bodies don't crave risk. They avoid it. So if you want your sex life to survive this chapter, you stop trying to force desire and you start building it. You create the conditions, the comfort, the time, the warmth, the low pressure, and the playful tension. And you stop acting like sex is a proof of love, because sex isn't just sex for men. It's often security. And if you make your partner responsible for your security, she'll eventually stop wanting to touch you because now touching you comes with responsibility. That is the opposite of erotic. This is the part where men need to grow up. You can want your partner and still handle not tonight without turning into a sulking bitch-ass teenager. You can be horny and still kind. You can feel disconnected and still not weaponize it. That right there is maturity, and maturity is attractive. Here's the good news for the men who can handle this. When you remove pressure, when you protect comfort, when you reduce stress, when you stop treating initiation like a test, desire often shows up again, sometimes differently, sometimes slower, but often with more honesty and intensity because it isn't being forced. You don't need your partner to have the same desire pattern she had at 25. You need to stop making her desire pattern at 45, 50, and 55 feel unsafe. That's how you keep it hot. Men love blaming menopause for everything because it's convenient. It's like a one-word scapegoat that lets you avoid looking at the boring, brutal truth. Sometimes the libido isn't the problem. Sometimes the relationship symptoms aren't the problem. And menopause just pulled the curtain back. This is the part where guys get uncomfortable. So if you're the kind of man who thinks he's being personally attacked whenever someone suggests you might be contributing to the vibe, go ahead and clench. We'll wait. Here's what happens in a long-term relationship, especially heterosexual ones. She becomes the household brain. Not she cleans more. I mean the real invisible work, remembering everything, tackling everything, tracking everything, anticipating and managing everything. Family stuff, appointments, bills, food, social obligations. Who needs what? What's running out? What day it is? What time it is? What everyone's mood. I mean, I could keep going. And somehow she's also supposed to want sex in the middle of that, like she's on a romance vacation. Then perimenopause shows up and sleep goes to hell. Patience gets thin and she loses the extra capacity she used to have to silently absorb all of that shit. So men see her more irritated, more blunt, more, I'm not doing this anymore. And they go, menopause changed her. Well, yeah, maybe. But here's the version men don't want to hear. She didn't change as much as she stopped buffering. She stopped quietly making everything smooth while you coast. And you can call that hormones if you want, but it's often just a woman hitting the wall of overload and saying nope. Now let's make this explicit for the guys because you'll miss it if I say it politely. A woman who feels like your manager is not going to want to fuck you. I should put that on a t-shirt. It's because it's not erotic to feel like you're parenting a grown-ass man. It's not erotic to be the only adult who notices what needs done. It's not erotic to carry the whole mental load and then be expected to switch into sexy wife mode on command. That switch doesn't flip when she's exhausted and resentful. It flips when she feels like she has a partner, not another responsibility. And this is where men say the thing that makes women want to levitate out of their bodies. Just tell me what you need. That sentence sounds helpful to men. It feels like teamwork. To a woman who's been doing the invisible management for years, it sounds like, please continue being the manager. Now add the job of assigning tasks to me like I'm an employee. So now she has to do the work and direct you. And you want credit for being willing? No. If you live there, the goal isn't help. The goal is participate like you're an adult who also lives in the house. And yes, I know you have a job, you're tired, your back hurts, life is hard, same. Welcome, everybody's tired. Here's the difference. Most men have never been asked to emotionally and mentally hold the whole household the way women often do. So men think they're doing half when they're doing chores. Meanwhile, she's doing the chores plus the planning, plus the remembering, plus the anticipating, plus the emotional atmosphere management. And the worst part is men usually don't even notice it until it starts affecting sex. Then they suddenly care because the penis is inconvenienced. Nothing says romance like only noticing your partner's workload when it interrupts your access. So let's talk about what resentment does to sex, because this is the heat killer that lives in the walls. Resentment turns touch into a trap. If she's already overloaded and resentful, then you touch her and she thinks, is he being affectionate or is this the start of a request? Because if affection always turns into escalation, then affection stops feeling safe. And when affection isn't safe, she stops offering it. Then men complain. She never cuddles anymore. She never touches me. Right, because you trained her that touch comes with pressure. Resentment also turns sex into a chore. Not because she doesn't love you, but because she already has 12 tasks in her head and now feels like sex is task number 13. Especially if the sex is the same rushed routine where her pleasure is optional and your orgasm is treated like the success metric. And if sex has become uncomfortable at times because of dryness or sensitivity, now it's chore plus discomfort. That's a double no thanks in her eyes. Now, men love to respond to all of this with, but I do a lot. Okay, let's assume you do. Here's the question men hate. Do you do it without being asked? Because doing things only after she asks means she's still managing. You're still the assistant, she's still the boss. And boss energy is not what most women want to feel when they're trying to relax into desire. What makes a woman melt in this chapter is not one heroic gesture. It's the steady, boring, consistent reality of being partnered with a man whose presence reduces her load instead of adding to it. A man who notices, a man who handles things, a man who doesn't need instructions like the freaking Roomba. And I know some guys are thinking this sounds like chores equals sex. No, that's not what I'm saying. If you do chores expecting sex as payment, congratulations. You're now making chores sexual pressure. That's the dumbest possible fucking upgrade. What I'm saying is when the relationship feels fair and supported, desire has room to exist. When she feels alone and overburdened, desire gets smothered. Now, let's talk about the male emotional trap here. When resentment shows up, men often respond with defensiveness. Wait, so I'm the bad guy now? Or so everything is my fault? You're just being hormonal. That defensiveness is how resentment turns into distance. Because instead of hearing, I'm overwhelmed and I need partnership, you hear, you suck. And then you get wounded and you stop showing up, which proves her point. This is where men need to learn a skill they avoid like the plague. Being accountable without collapsing into shame. You can hear, I need more from you without turning it into, I'm a failure, I'm being attacked, she hates me. You can just hear it as information. Because if your partner is entering a season where her capacity is changing, your relationship has to adapt. That's not punishment, that's reality. And here's the heat part, because I promised heat. Nothing makes a woman feel safe to be sexual like a man who is solid. Not dominant, solid. A man who can handle life, who doesn't need managing, who stays warm when he's frustrated, who doesn't pout her into sex, and whose presence feels like relief. Relief? Foreplay. Relief is the thing that makes her body unclench. And when her body unclenches, desire has somewhere to land. So if you want the bedroom to stay alive through menopause, don't just focus on sex technique. Focus on the daily reality that determines whether she has any capacity left for pleasure. Because menopause doesn't usually kill desire by itself. Overload and resentment do. And men who don't adapt find themselves standing in the kitchen like, why don't we have sex anymore? Because she's exhausted, irritated, and carrying the entire life machine while you're still asking what you can do to help like you're a summer intern. Come on, guys, be better than that. If you want the most honest answer to why did our sex life die, it's usually not menopause. It's this. You two learned how to fight like enemies, not lovers. Then you never cleaned it up. Then you tried to have sex on top of unresolved contempt like it was going to magically turn into passion. Spoiler alert, your nervous system does not get turned on by disrespect. Perimenopause and menopause don't necessarily create conflict, but they absolutely reduce the tolerance for it. When sleep is worse and stress hits harder, patience gets thinner. That's not a moral failure. That's biology and exhaustion doing what they do. The list of sleep problems and mood changes are common in this phase. Everybody lists them. So if your relationship already had sloppy conflict habits, this chapter is going to expose them loudly. And here's what men do wrong when conflict spikes. They either escalate like they're trying to win a trial, or they withdraw like they're punishing the relationship. Both options kill heat, just at different speeds. Let's talk escalation first. Escalation looks like snapping back, matching tone, getting sarcastic, bringing up old crap, setting the record straight, and saying things that feel good in the moment because they scratch the ego. This is where men love the phrase, "I'm just being honest." No, you're being mean and you're calling it honesty so you don't have to be accountable. There's a difference between truth and cruelty. If you can't tell the difference, your relationship is going to pay for it in months of distance in a bedroom that feels like a tense handshake. Now let's talk withdrawal. Withdrawal is the male classic. You shut down, go cold, stop talking, stop touching, engaging. Sometimes you call it, "I'm calming down." Sometimes you call it, "I don't want to say something I might regret." And sometimes it is a calm down. But a lot of time, it's not calm, it's punishment. It's you silently saying, "If I'm not happy, nobody gets warmth." And if you do that long enough, she stops trying. She stops reaching. She stops trusting you with her emotions. Then you say she's emotionally distant. Well, yeah, because you trained her that closeness leads to coldness. Now, here's the core point for this part. You can't expect intimacy to stay alive in a relationship where conflict feels unsafe. Because sex requires vulnerability. Vulnerability requires safety. Safety disappears when fights become scorched earth. So what do? You learn to fight in a way that doesn't poison the relationship for weeks. That starts with something men hate: boundaries. Not boundaries like you can't say anything. Boundaries like we don't fight dirty. Dirty fighting is the name calling, contempt, mocking, threats, bringing up private insecurities in order to hurt the other person, sexual shaming, or the "fine, I'll just never touch you again" dramatic ultimatum. And of course, the silent treatment for days. If your conflict style includes any of that, you don't have a communication problem, you have a respect problem. And respect isn't optional if you want sex to stay alive. Nobody gets turned on by contempt. The part men need to hear: timing matters. If your partner is exhausted, overheated, anxious, foggy, or already emotionally maxed out, this is not the moment to start a serious conversation like you're dropping quarterly feedback. Midnight talks are where relationships go to die. You're both tired, your patience is gone, and you're about to say something permanent in a temporary moment. If sleep issues are part of the menopause transition, you have to respect that your window for productive conflict shrinks. So the adult move is learning to pause. And yes, men mess this up too. They either refuse to pause because they're addicted to winning, or they pause and never come back because they're addicted to avoidance. A pause is only useful if it has two parts: stop the escalation and a return to repair. If you pause and then disappear into your phone for 2 days, you didn't pause, you abandoned. If you demand resolve it right now while everyone is dysregulated, you didn't communicate, you bulldozed. So the skill is stop the fight before it becomes a war, then come back when you can actually talk without shredding each other. Let's talk about the sex part of conflict, because men love to pretend this isn't connected. Unresolved conflict makes touch feel suspicious. If you fought last night and never repaired, and today you come in trying to initiate like nothing happened, she's not thinking, "Oh, he wants me." She's thinking, "So we're just going to ignore that? Cool, this feels fake." Or she's thinking, "Are you trying to use sex to smooth things over without accountability?" And if sex becomes a tool to avoid conflict, sex becomes emotionally complicated. Then you'll wonder why sex feels tense, because your relationship has a backlog of unprocessed hurt sitting under it. Now, I'm going to say something men need, even if it stings. Being right is not the same thing as being close. Men will sacrifice intimacy on the altar of being right and then act confused as to why the bedroom is cold. You can be right and still be destructive. If your rightness comes with dismissiveness or contempt, you lose the war even if you win the argument. So what's the grown man move? It's repair. Repair is the sexiest relationship skill nobody wants to practice because it requires humility. Repair means you say, I went too far, I was defensive, I didn't handle that well. I get why you're upset. I'm not here to win, I'm here to be close. Not because you're groveling, because you're prioritizing the relationship over your ego. And if you're thinking, well, what if she's wrong? Great, she might be. Repair isn't agreeing with everything. Repair is restoring safety so you can actually solve problems without turning into enemies. Here's the core point for men. If you want your partner to feel safe being sexual with you, she needs to trust that conflict won't turn you into a weapon. She needs to trust that you won't punish her for being upset. She needs to trust that you won't use her vulnerability against her. She needs to trust that you can disagree without becoming cruel. That trust is foreplay, not the kind you see in porn, the kind your nervous system actually responds to. Because when she feels safe, her body unclenches. When her body unclenches, desire has space. When she doesn't feel safe, her body braces, and bracing is the enemy of arousal. So if you're a guy listening, you want to know what to do this week, here's the blunt version. Stop fighting like a teenager. Stop withdrawing like a punishment. Stop using sarcasm as a weapon. Stop turning truth into cruelty. Repair fast. And don't try to initiate when the relationship is still bleeding from last night. Menopause doesn't have to kill intimacy. But a relationship that never repairs, that'll kill it every time. If you're a guy listening and you've ever said, babe, you're still beautiful, and then watched it land like a wet sock, welcome. You just discovered that women aren't vending machines where you insert a compliment and receive confidence. This part is about something men underestimate because it's not concrete. Erotic identity. Not just, is she attractive? Erotic identity is whether she feels at home in her body, whether she feels desirable to herself, and whether she feels safe being seen and touched without being evaluated. And menopause can mess with that. Not because women suddenly stop being sexy, but because a bunch of internal stuff shifts at once. Sleep can get wrecked, mood can get weird, brain fog can show up, anxiety can spike, bodies can change shape or feel different. And if you're a man who thinks confidence is just how she looks, you're going to keep missing the point. Because here's what's actually happening for a lot of women. They're not just dealing with symptoms, they're dealing with the feeling of being unfamiliar to themselves. They look in the mirror and don't recognize the same version of me they've been used to. Their body reacts differently, their energy changes, their desire pattern changes. Sometimes sex feels different, sometimes their confidence takes a hit for reasons they can't even fully explain. So when you respond with, you look fine to me, you're basically saying, my eyes approve, problem solved. But what she hears is, you don't get it and you're not even trying. Now let's talk about the male error that makes this even worse. Making her confidence about your reassurance needs. Men get nervous when their partner confidence dips, right? Because men are terrified of losing access, intimacy, or the sense that they're desired. So we start fishing. Are you okay? Do you still want me? Am I still attractive to you? Is this because of me? And now she's dealing with her body changing and her partner demanding emotional proof of life. That's not support. That's you making her carry your insecurity while she's already carrying herself. If you want her to feel sexy again, stop treating her as your reassurance machine. Now, let's get explicit for the guys, because this is the part where men unintentionally turn women off for weeks. A woman who feels self-conscious is not going to relax into pleasure if she thinks you're going to escalate every touch into a demand, react poorly if she doesn't go all the way, if you get moody if she pauses or changes her mind, or if you treat her body like it's supposed to perform on schedule. If she senses pressure, her nervous system braces, and bracing kills arousal. We've said it before. Bracing makes her body feel less open, less receptive, less comfortable. And if sex has been uncomfortable at times because of dryness or sensitivity, bracing makes it worse. So your job is not convince her she's hot. Your job is to be a safe space for her to feel hot, which for men requires the most difficult skill on earth: restraint. Not coldness, not distance, restraint. Restraint means that you can be turned on and still not turn every moment into pressure. You can hold desire without demanding it be satisfied right now. Restraint is the difference between I want you and I'm safe and I want you and now you have to manage me. Women can feel that difference immediately. And here's another thing men do that makes confidence worse. They turn sex into a performance metric. If sex becomes a situation where she's worried about taking too long or not getting wet enough or being broken or not responding the same way or disappointing you, then she's in her head. And being in your head is the opposite of being in your body. And sex is a body sport, not a thought sport, for the most part. So how do you help rebuild erotic confidence without being corny? You do it with specifics and steadiness, not you're hot. That's pretty generic. Steady desire looks like you stay affectionate even if sex doesn't happen. You flirt without needing an outcome. You touch in ways that don't immediately become a request. You don't punish her for having a body. And yes, sometimes you say compliments. But you say them like a man who's paying attention, not like a man reading a script to prevent a dead bedroom. Specific desire is powerful. It's not, you look nice. It's, I love the way you look when you're relaxed. It's, I love how you smell when you're close. Or, I love the way you melt when I take my time. It's, I love watching you get turned on. That kind of desire is about experience, not just appearance. And it matters because a lot of women in this chapter are dealing with the fear of being less wanted, less relevant, less sexy. So the partner who stays steady, who doesn't panic, who doesn't pressure, who doesn't withdraw, becomes kind of an anchor. That anchor is what makes it possible to explore again. Now, I'm going to talk about the thing men don't want to admit. Men get weird about aging too. Men get insecure, performance anxious, worried about erections, worried about stamina, worried about their bodies, and then they take it out sideways. They pressure, they rush, they get snippy or controlling. They act like women are the only ones changing. But if you're the guy and you're insecure too, the move isn't to use her body as a reassurance source. The move is to handle your own stuff without turning her into your solution. Because if both partners are fragile and demanding reassurance, the relationship becomes a tug of war of insecurity, and nothing about that is sexy. So here's the takeaway from this part in plain old Nash language. If you want your partner to feel sexy, stop trying to argue her into confidence. Stop doing compliment theater. Stop making her responsible for your reassurance. Stop turning touch into pressure. Be steady, be specific, protect comfort. Keep desire present but not demanding. Because confidence doesn't come from you saying you look fine. Confidence comes from her nervous system feeling safe enough to relax into being desired. And men who can create that environment don't just get their sex life back. They get a deeper, filthier, more honest version of it because it isn't built on panic. It's built on safety and attention. This is the part where men usually get either weirdly controlling or weirdly avoidant. Controlling looks like, I don't like hormones, so you shouldn't take them. Avoidant looks like, well, good luck with that. while you quietly pray her symptoms resolve themselves through sheer willpower and the healing power of ignoring it. Both are trash bullshit strategies. So here's the grown man version of this chapter. There are options. A lot of them are normal, and the goal is comfort, quality of life, and a sex life that doesn't feel like a negotiation with the Grim Reaper. First, let's get one thing straight. Menopause symptoms are not one size fits all. Some women skate through it. Some get hit hard. Some have a few symptoms. Some have the whole freaking package. There's a point made that symptoms can last months or years and change over time. So if you're a guy listening, your job is not to decide what it should be like. Your job is to respond to what it is like for your partner. The most common mistake men make when the topic of treatment comes up is acting like there are only two camps. HRT is magic and everyone needs it, or HRT is dangerous and nobody should touch it. Both of those extremes are internet brain just bullshit. Real life is more nuanced. The Menopause Society's 2022 hormone therapy position statement says hormone therapy is the most effective treatment for vasomotor symptoms, hot flashes and night sweats, and it can help GSM too. And it emphasizes that risks and benefits vary based on things like age, time since menopause, type, dose, route, and individual health history. Translation, it's individualized. It's not a cult. It's not a demon. It's a medical decision. And yes, some women use systemic hormone therapy for broader symptoms like hot flashes and night sweats. Again, depending on individualized risk and benefit. But here's the part men need to hear loudly. Your job is to support her decision with her doctor, not run the show with your opinion. You are absolutely fine to have concerns, ask questions. You can be part of the conversation if she wants, but you're not the CEO of her hormones. Now, let's talk about when to get help, because men love to wait until the situation is a 5-alarm fire. If symptoms are affecting quality of life, it's reasonable to talk to a doctor. And if sex is painful, don't keep trying like pain is a hurdle to overcome. Pain trains avoidance. Pain trains fear. Pain creates bracing. Bracing makes pain worse. It's a dumb loop. We've said it in this episode already. All right, now let's get back to the relationship, because the truth is, even if symptoms were treated perfectly, the relationship still needs to adapt. This is where couples either get better or get bitter. The couples who get better do a few things. They stop treating sex like a pass-fail test. They stop making initiation a referendum on love. They protect comfort like it matters. They fight cleaner and repair faster. They address resentment and household imbalance instead of pretending it's just hormones. And they create a sex life that's flexible enough to survive changing bodies. The couples who do get bitter do the complete opposite. They keep score, they pressure, they withdraw, they let the bedroom become a silent battleground. You know how it goes. So if you're a guy listening and you want the blunt, what do I do in this chapter? It's not complicated. Be the man whose presence makes her life easier, not harder. Be the man who can adapt without sulking. Be the man who treats comfort like it's sexy. The one that can handle not tonight. And for the love of everything, stop acting like lube is an insult. Menopause doesn't have to kill your sex life, but if you handle it with entitlement, pressure, avoidance, and ego, it absolutely will. So, grow up, stay warm, stay playful, get educated, and stop making her body your personal crisis. That's the long game, and it works. I appreciate you still being here, and if you are, either you actually care about your partner or you're hoping I'm about to drop some secret code that turns menopause into a porn category. Bad news, there is no cheat code. There's just reality, and whether you're mature enough to handle it without making everything about your ego. Here's the truth in one sentence. Menopause doesn't end relationships. Menopause exposes them. It exposes whether you've been a partner or a passenger. It exposes whether your intimacy was built on safety or convenience. It exposes whether you can adapt or whether you only know one version of sex and one version of connection. If your partner's body is changing and your response is pressure, pouting, withdrawal, sarcasm, or just fix it, you're not a victim, you're an asshole, and you're part of the problem. If your response is steadiness, patience, and actual partnership, this chapter doesn't have to shrink your sex life. It can sharpen it. It can make it more intentional, more honest, more responsive, and yes, even hotter because it's built on comfort and trust instead of routine and entitlement. And for the guys who need to hear this bluntly, sex isn't owned. Desire can't be bullied. Comfort isn't optional. Lube is not an insult. Being right isn't the same as being close. If you can't handle not tonight, you're not safe to be intimate with. So if you love this woman and you want to stay connected to her, do the unsexy work that makes the sexy stuff possible. Show up, lighten the load, fight cleaner, repair faster. Stop taking everything personally. Stop acting like your needs are the only needs. Support her getting help she wants. Be a calm place to land. Because a woman who feels safe, supported, and wanted without pressure is a woman whose body has a chance to relax again. And when her body relaxes, the heat has room to come back. That's it. No gimmicks. No cringe scripts. No 10 tips infographic. Just a grown man telling other grown men, don't be the reason this chapter gets harder. If you want to keep this conversation going, send us your questions. If you want to argue, do it somewhere else. And if you want to be the guy who makes this partner feel more alone during menopause, congratulations. You're going to earn a very quiet house and a very dead bedroom. I'm Nash, and we'll see you next episode.